Welcome to the Rever Rundown. Grab a coffee and get ready to learn and unlearn a few things. It's February, my birthday month, my favorite month, and it's usually a time when people have abandoned their New Year's resolutions and start feeling so bad about themselves. But I'm here to tell you, it's not you, it's your stinking resolution. Get rid of it. You don't need those garbage resolutions. What you actually need is a plan, okay? And I'm going to walk you through what I do with my patients when we're trying to create new behaviors or habits. People don't fail because they don't have discipline, okay? They fail because what they had planned was not sustainable in the first place. It didn't fit their life. So forget new year, new you. Let's do new year, same you, but upgraded. So we're going to talk about how you identify the behavior that you want to put into practice and how you change behaviors that you might not want to keep doing. Now, I've compiled a bunch of research in order to bring this to you. I've also listened to some amazing podcasts and some audiobooks. I'm going to reference them and you'll be able to see them in the show notes and in the references below. Before we break down what forms a habit, how you can hack your habits, how you can break your bad habits, let's talk about what a habit actually is. A habit is a repeated behavior. Our brains like to keep things simple. They don't want friction. They want to do what they repeatedly do. Think about when you drive somewhere and you get to your location, somewhere you go all the time, but when you get there, you don't realize how you actually got there. That's a habit. That's your brain doing what it has been doing and what it knows to do, getting to that location. It's on autopilot. What I'm going to teach you today is how to identify the behaviors that form habits so that you can understand how to identify your habits, how to hack your habits, and how to break your bad habits. This is going to be a game-changing strategy. And why? I'm going to share a story with you of how it worked in my life and how you can apply it to your life. And I'm so excited for this episode because I truly believe in what we're going to talk about. I see it working in my patients' lives. And I hope that you are able to take something from it today. One of the first things that I want to talk about is, and trust me, this will all make sense, okay? I want to talk about a scientist called Ivan Pavlov. He won the Nobel Peace Prize for something called classical conditioning. And he did these experiments with dogs. Now, I'm not calling you a dog, but hear me out here, okay? So he did these experiments with dogs where they would ring a bell, they would show the dog a piece of meat, and then the dog would start drooling. Then over time, they rang the bell, they did not show the piece of meat, and the dogs would still drool. What I'm trying to show you with this story is that you can be conditioned to do any type of behavior that you want to do. It's about having it on repeat and identifying the things that come before it, right? The bell, and then the piece of meat for you in order to make this behavior reality. And the reason why I know that this actually works is because it happened and it works for me in my real life when I've implemented, and I'll share that story with you a little bit later. So we're going to identify things that are cues, behaviors, and then rewards, okay? This is how our brain works. The brain says, when this happens, this is the behavior I do, and this is my reward. So one of the most common things I see in my patients is their moms, they're exhausted. They put their kids to sleep. Then that's the cue, right? I put my kid to sleep. The behavior, I pour myself a glass of wine and I sit on the couch. The reward is self-care. I get to relax. But oftentimes, this is a behavior that doesn't really serve them, right? And I'm going to break down how we can turn this cue, putting your kid to sleep, into a better behavior. For example, doing 5 or 10 minutes of yoga. Now, it might not be easy when you first put it into practice, but consistency always beats intensity. I promise you. And consistency is boring, right? It's not sexy. It's not trendy. It's not cool, but I promise you it gives you results. For example, you have your cue, right? I put my kid to bed at 7 o'clock. There's 2 types of cue. There's a time cue and there's a behavior cue. So the time cue is going to say, every night I put my kid to bed at 7. They usually fall asleep around 8. At 8 o'clock, I get my behavior. My behavior could be, for example, going for a walk on the treadmill or going to do my skincare or doing some yoga. Or in the case of the behavior that you might want to break, it was sitting on the couch and having that glass of wine, right? So that's the behavior. Time cues, again, are the things that are like, okay, it's 7 o'clock, I'm going to do this, or it's 10 p.m., I'm going to do this, or it's 2 o'clock, I'm going to do this. Those cues are a little bit weaker and they don't have consistent results. Whereas if you do a cue based on a behavior, for example, every time I have lunch, I'm going to have a sip of water. Or every time after I eat lunch at work, I'm going to go do the lap around the building. Or for example, every single day when I put my kids to sleep, I'm going to go straight to my bathroom and do my skincare. Or I'm going to go straight to the yoga mat and I'm going to do my 5 minutes of yoga. These are more likely to succeed because they're based on a behavior, whereas our bodies will not really pay attention to the time, right? And the time changes. So then there goes your whole routine because it feels like 9 o'clock when it's really 8 o'clock. So generally don't recommend doing time-based cues, more so behavior-based cues. They're going to last longer. They're going to be sturdier habits. So we talked about these cues and these behaviors. It's really important to identify and be consistent. So the minute that the cue occurs, you're going to implement the behavior. I'm going to give an example of how I implemented this in my life and why I think it works so well and how I use this with my patients. So I told you the story about Pavlov's dog. Now, I know that coffee for me is my reward in the morning, right? I wake up and in order for me to go do, I must have coffee. So I knew that my reward was going to be a cup of coffee. The behavior is going to be getting up out of bed at 5 a.m., right? So I set an automatic timer for my coffee to go off every single morning at 5 a.m. And I set an alarm every single morning for 5:10 a.m. So when the alarm goes off, my cue to wake up, my reward is already percolated and I can smell it. So I get up out of bed and I'm like, okay, I have this coffee, time to get out of bed. I smell the coffee, I can get out of bed. That's my reward. This works so well, okay, that when I was on vacation, my husband had a work call at 4 a.m. and he brewed himself one single cup of coffee and I smelled that coffee at 4 a.m. and I was wide awake. And this is when it hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, I have classically conditioned myself. I am Pavlov's dogs and I have now been conditioned to wake up and get ready to go at the smell of my coffee. So this really works, but it's about consistency, right? So you need to repeat the behavior. And at the beginning, it's going to be harder. Like at the beginning, you better believe I wanted to hit snooze 13 times, but I knew that that smell of coffee, that reward was going to get me up and out of bed. So it's really important that you, A, be consistent, B, set a reward that you are going to be motivated by, and create a realistic behavior. I'm not getting up at 5 a.m. to go run a half marathon. I'm getting up at 5 a.m. to do some morning meditation, prepare things for my day, things that I know are going to make my life easier. So I have a double reward, right? I'm a better mom to my kids. I'm nicer. I'm in a better mood because I'm not frantic. And I also get my piping hot cup of coffee that it makes me so happy, right? Without interruptions, it doesn't get cold by the time I finish drinking it. So that's my reward. Now, it's really important that when you, and I feel like I keep on saying it, but it is really important to be consistent. Consistency, again, is going to trump that intensity. And we're going to circle back to that in just a minute. But we also want to talk about how you want to embody your habits. So when you're picking a habit, I want you to pick something that you actually truly want to become. And then you're going to say, I will by doing X, right? So I want you to be that thing. So when I have a conversation with my patients and they're trying to implement a habit, I tell them, who do you see yourself being like? What is the highest version of you? What does that person look like? And then what does that person do? And so they'll often say, oh, so-and-so is that future version of me is healthy. And I ask them, what does that look like? Like, let's be really specific here. What does healthy mean to you? Oh, they go for a walk every single day is what somebody once told me. And I was like, okay, so what do you need to do to bring this future you and this present you together so that you can get closer to that? And they say certain things like, okay, well, I'll need to put my shoes out next to my bed and I'm going to listen to my favorite podcast while I'm on this walk. What are those things? Cues. The shoes are next to the bed. We're making this easier. We're taking away friction. Behavior, putting on the sneakers, going for the walk. Reward, the podcast, right? And then over time, you also get a sense of satisfaction knowing that I said I was going to do this and I actually did this. Okay, so we've talked about, there's cues, there's the behavior, there's the reward, right? We always want to be able to identify that. If you can identify that, I really think you can set your mind and do anything. It's so powerful, right? And the power in your hands is ultimately the biggest catalyst for change when you realize you do have the power to do things. And I think a lot of times when it comes to being healthy, people always think there's like another fix or another solution that they can do, but you can already do so much today, right now, with this information that you're getting. Now, this is something that we absolutely have to debunk. I'm sure you've heard of it. How many days, and I did a poll on Instagram, how many days does it take to form a habit? And some people were like, 14, 21, 75. This is wild. There was a study done by Lally et al., and we'll link it, and it actually took 18 all the way to 254 days to establish a habit, with the median day being around 66. And then obviously there was a little bit of variations depending on what the habit was. But if you are on day 200 of trying to establish a habit and you feel like, oh my gosh, when is this going to happen for me? I've been doing this for 200 days and it still doesn't feel like it's going on autopilot. Don't feel like something is wrong with you. Don't feel like you're behind. It can take up to 254 days. So you keep on going. You might be surprised by day 256, you're there, you have your habit. Okay. So like, that's the reality. We have this idea that it's going to take 21 days to make a habit because somebody told you that, or you saw it somewhere. And I'm guilty of that. I used to think, okay, 21 days makes a habit. And then I've learned, and I found this literature, this study that shows that it can take up to 254 days to solidify a habit. And truly, it makes me feel so much better, right? Because it isn't really until you have a year of this change that it feels like an integral part of your life. Okay. You have the habit, right? You have your cue, you have your behavior, you have your reward. You're on day 256. You know that this habit is now part of your life. You feel fantastic. Okay. But what happens? There is a change. You move, you get a new job, a new baby enters the world. Oh my gosh, your habit's going to get a little bit like, I don't know, discombobulated. It's going to feel like it just exploded. And you're going to feel like all your hard work has led you to this failure. No, you're not, because you're going to have listened to this podcast and you're going to go, oh no, Mimi talked about this. I know exactly what I need to do right now. You're going to stop. You're going to take a deep breath. And because you have established your habits with behaviors, you know that you can just stack them on to behaviors, but maybe they need to shift, right? So for example, you have a new baby. Your previous habit was you would wake up every single morning at 5 a.m. and you would hit the gym. But now it's 5 a.m. and you have a 3-month-old baby. They sleep 8 hours a night though, so you're solid there, okay? You got your 8 hours of sleep, but the baby wakes up, all right, at 5 a.m. with you. Now your new habit could be, I wake up at 5 a.m. when my baby wakes up and I give the baby a bottle, and then baby Bobby, reclined but upright time while I get my 30 minutes in. Maybe you previously did an hour of working out or 45 minutes, and all you can do at this phase of your life is 15 minutes. But that's when that consistency comes in, because the time and the day and the future, or in the future, when you're able to do your 45 minutes again, you will be able to come back to that habit. Also, you need to have a little compassion for yourself. Okay. We're going to have changes in our life. Okay. Things we're going to come and they're going to disrupt our routines and our habits. It doesn't mean you failed. It just means you need to reassess. You need to re-identify, what are my cues? What are my behaviors? And what are my rewards? They're going to change. In my 20s, a reward might have been a cute top and a pair of shoes. Right now, a reward for me is probably going to get a massage, or the good feelings I get of endorphins, or the 30 minutes of peace and solitude that I get when I have my headphones on and I'm running on a treadmill while my kids are playing on the iPad. Right? That reward changes just like you're going to change. But if you have the tools of being able to identify the behavior that you want, the cues that are going to come before it, and the reward you're going to give yourself, you're golden. You can do anything. Let's talk about one last thing before we wrap it up. And I'm sure you've heard it many places before, but you're going to hear it again here with me. We're going to talk about your mindset. Mindset is everything. It's so important. And studies show that showing up for yourself when you feel like you don't want to, when you're being consistent with those behaviors and you show up on a hard day, you're going to get more benefit from showing up on those hard days than you are going to get from the days where you show up and it's easy, right? And failures make us stronger. In the past, I used to think, oh my gosh, if I fail, then I'm not even going to do it. If it's not perfect, then why bother? But now I've learned, and especially you learn this when you train, when you work out at the gym, when you lift heavy. In order to get stronger, you have to fail. You push your muscle to failure. And so failure makes you stronger. And I have taken this with me into so many aspects of my life. And I want you to take this with you, right? I want you to think, okay, I had one bad day. I had one bad setback. I'm going to go again tomorrow, because consistency is what builds and gives you results and is what creates those habits. It's not, that one time that you do it. It's the time that you show up for yourself over and over and over again, especially when you don't want to. It's not what you do one day. It's what you do the majority of your days, right? And so that's why this is so important. And so I think the last thing that we're going to do to close off this podcast is I want to give you 3 takeaways, okay? And I'm going to read them because I don't want to mess them up and I want to make sure that you have these. If you only remember 3 things from this episode, let it be this. 1, Start with foundational keystone habits. Pick 1 to 2 habits that you want to start. Let's not take something away. Let's add something to your life. Number 2, ditch perfectionism. I promise you it won't get you anywhere, okay? Present over perfect. Good enough is good enough. Just show up for yourself. And number 3, use a cue-based habit blueprint. For example, the cue. When I do X, I will do Y, and Y is going to be the behavior, and my reward is going to be, right? So 3 blanks you want to fill in. So here's your cue to go and start a new behavior and give yourself a reward for getting it done. I hope that you get something from this episode and it helps you implement a sustainable, lifelong behavior that's going to make you happier and healthier. Thanks for tuning in and hanging out with me today. I hope you learned at least one thing that might actually move the needle in your health. Remember, it's about progress and not perfection. If you take even one tiny nugget from today and actually use it, you're already ahead of yesterday's you. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend, follow, and leave a review or a question. Every bit of engagement helps this content reach more people, and we're on a mission to help people live their healthiest lives. If you're interested in becoming a patient at Rever Wellness, you can apply directly on our website. See show notes below for more details. See you next week for another rundown. This podcast and its accompanying materials, including show notes, transcripts, emails, social media posts, and downloadable resources, are provided for general informational and educational purposes only. The content does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or any other professional healthcare services, nor does it include the provision of medical advice. Listening to this podcast or engaging with its content does not establish a provider-patient relationship between you and the hosts, guests, or affiliated entities. The information presented is not intended to be a substitute for individualized medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment from a licensed healthcare professional. You should not disregard, avoid, or delay seeking medical care because of something you have heard or read in the podcast. Always consult your qualified healthcare provider regarding any medical condition, symptoms, or before making any changes to your healthcare medications, supplements, diet, exercise, sleep, or lifestyle practices.